streamers or people who are watching the video replay if I have to cough or something. I had that kind of sickness where I didn't realize until I woke up feeling much better that is normal this morning. I actually was sick yesterday. I wasn't just lazy and letting myself be
Did you
bored.
have to go do the whole COVID test and everything?
No, no.
Or is
I
this
actually
just
did
straight
think
up
maybe I should do that, but
cold?
no. Maybe I should do that. Can you?
We have the home test. So I almost do it as a reflex now. Although I haven't felt, when I had it over the summer, it was good to know. Although I don't know, I
Yeah.
feel like you probably, like, I don't know, you don't like the fact that you're podcasting and you seem like pretty good. Like,
Well, that
and
is a
immediately
reminder.
diagnosed you was like, I don't think you have it.
I
Like, either that or you're in like day one and you're just like,
Yeah,
I'm not
I,
sure
I
what this
am. I
is.
am. I am going to Monktoberfest next week. Just as an
Oh,
update, they did not accept my talk because they had already filled out all their talks,
oh
which
my
is fine.
goodness. That's
Steven said he would accept one of my talks for next year. So I was like, sure, let's see what happens. but uh,
What you
but
should
they
do? You should take. Are you gonna take the recording gear? You should. Steve, our friend
probably.
Stephen O'Grady. He was over at. He did a little podcast. Maybe we'll even touch on the show with our friends at the Changelog. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
like
yeah,
I was like, man, we should. I can't believe we never had him on. Like,
yeah.
that's bad on us.
Yeah,
So
but anyways, they being the they're from the far left leaning wing of the tech party,
mhm.
so I have to take 2 COVID tests before I can go. I think I need to take one. I don't know, 24. They sent me a whole kit. I've got to take one like 24 hours ahead, and the next day I don't know. So we'll see. But
All
that's
right, so
kind
you
of
have
the idea.
time. But you have time to like heal up. Like how many weeks
Well,
you
I
have?
don't. I
When
mean,
is
just
it?
to be clear, I don't believe I have the COVID.
Okay. I didn't mean to
Like,
insinuate anything. I didn't mean it's
I
okay if you
just
do. I
had
won't judge you either way. It's not a
I just had one day yesterday where I felt like a little loggy. That was it. Nothing before. Like,
I love it. This is like the best. And now like we're gonna like have you like quarantine for a year. You're like, you can't leave. You can't leave your office.
but yeah, I'll have to take
When
the
is
test before I go. But
Oktoberfest? Obviously it's in October.
where
Is it?
is that box? I hope I know where it is. Hmm. It is next week on. It
There
starts
you
the
go.
night
I'll
of
give you some homework.
October
That would be
4th.
great. You should. I don't know. I know it's too much work. Maybe they'll have an AV gear there though. Maybe they'll
Yeah, this is
although this violates our rules of remote podcasting. Remote podcasting, you take your own gear and you never leave without the memory card. You
here
never
we
leave
go.
without the file. What is
That's
that?
true. This is the COVID testing kit they sent me.
Okay.
It was this is
Wow.
it
Wow, they
was
sent it all the way over. Jeez. Okay.
yeah. It's a funny story there. They have some service. I forget. Let's see if it's on here. We'll give them a free ad for whoever's
Uh-huh.
going to watch this. It is, yeah. What is it called? Oh, it's called Attend Safe, and they
Oh,
actually
so
had.
it's like for conferences. Is that what
Yeah,
the
they
deal
actually
is?
had.
Oh,
Yeah. They had a great thing. You have to one send in that you've had your 2 shots or whatever,
mhm.
and then two, they send you this kit, and I'll go look it up. But there's some period of time where you got to take a test, right? And
Got
you
it.
submit the test online, and then you can go.
Yeah,
But the
yeah.
funny
Mhm.
the funny part about or funny part, the here's like a Cote living in the Netherlands part is like about 2 years ago. So originally the Dutch government had an app that would have like in the EU. I think you have this in the States too, but the app would have a certificate that it was a QR code that you could scan, and you could also like go and look at the actual information, like what you had and everything. But like in the EU, people would just scan the QR code and you were done. Like it was
Mhm.
some standard. And then the maybe even a couple of years ago, the Dutch government, it was worded a little differently than this, but they were basically like, we don't need that anymore, so we're shutting down the app.
Yeah,
It's
so it's just
just
like
like
done, right? Yeah.
just like very Dutch. So I was kind
Mhm.
of like, huh, I don't actually know where I would get that information now. Like the app isn't there, so I can't do that. But then it turns out you can log into
And like print it out or like get a PDF it or
yeah,
something.
you can log into the department of the Ministry of Health, and you can get a printout of it, which is fine. Which is like that is kind of like you couldn't do that in the States, right? Like in the States, it would be more disorganized. Like I would actually need to have kept a copy or somehow get the record of it, right? Whereas
Yeah,
whereas
so the way
here,
it's
the
US
government keeps track of the records for me. Like it's
yeah, no, it's
impossible
I
to
wish.
lose.
I mean, it is a constant. So we all got cards. There's like a standard vaccine card. It's literally a paper card. And every time you get a COVID, like they go and they fill it out and they give you, and they just sign it. So you have that as option one. And then just because kind of like you were saying, I've sort of been trying to track, like have the electronic records just in case. And it's like sometimes your insurance company will record it and then create a vaccine like record. And then you can even import that into Apple Health. But it's very like hit or miss. Like if you get, like you'll know, like if you get the shot at HEB, like for some reason that system doesn't like integrate as well. But if you get it like CVS, which is like more integrated with my personal health insurance, then it kind of does show up. But then it's like, so I don't know. In the end, I just come back to like, you got to log into the various places that it could be, download a PDF, and then you have your record.
That's right.
And it is not, it's far from ideal.
Yeah. So anyways, thankfully I could log in and like, take a screenshot or PDF or whatever and send it to him, and it was fine. But it is kind of like, I don't know, it's weird. Anyhow, shall we start the episode?
Yeah, hold on. Let me. I forgot to.
I've got a crazy. Where is he going with this Cote opener to go through?
All right, hold on. Let me put it. I haven't been. I think I forgot to put it in the chat last week. All right, got that going. All right,
and now I have like what feels like that allergy thing, right? Where my nose is like burning in my eyes. Who knows? Maybe it was just bad allergies.
Maybe it's a sinus infection. I don't know what that really means. I'm not a diagnosed that, but like people tell me that all the time. Maybe you have a sinus infection. Hey, before we go, I've got some background noise here. I think it's all being filtered out. Are you hearing any like extraneous sounds?
No.
Okay, good work. Rode filter audio machine.
I need to get one of those one day. The only background noises I'm hearing, Brandon, is that constant talking in my head. That's
and sometimes the after show just finds you. All right, I am ready anytime you are.
All right, just a minute. Let me see if I can clear some stuff up. I've had a breakthrough in the work-life balance sort of mindset, Brandon. And that is what's happened is today, on and off, I've been trying to figure out in Dungeons & Dragons, if you have the crossbow expert feat, is that then makes using a net a viable option in combat. Okay, so here's the problem. Now, a net is a ranged weapon. So I have this ranger character that I play around with. And this ranger can use a net. But the problem with a net is it has a range of 5 feet, and then it has an extended range of like 10 feet. Now, with an extended range, when you attack with it, you roll at what's called a disadvantage, which means you have to check twice to see if you've been successful, which is not good, right? So that's 2 times, I don't know how math works, but you might fail. So that's not cool. You roll the dice twice and you take the lowest score, basically. You're forced to take the lowest score. However, if you have a crossbow expert feat, this means that you no longer are affected by this disadvantage when you attack within a 5-foot range. That's the other thing that I said, I skipped over, is in Dungeons & Dragons combat, when you use a ranged weapon, like a crossbow or a bow and arrow, if you're within 5 feet, you attack at a disadvantage. So you have to roll 2 dice and you take the lowest, which is bad, right? But if you get this feat, which you can get at 4th level, the crossbow expert, then you can attack within 5 feet without a disadvantage, which means you can use a net without it being a disadvantage. Now, when you use a net, you throw that at a creature, and the creature enters this condition called restrained. Now, in the restrained condition, they can't move, which has all sorts of interesting effects. They're frozen, and they attack at a disadvantage. So if they want to attack you, they have to roll 2 dice and take the lowest for their attack, right? And then you can attack at an advantage because they're restrained. So you get to roll 2 dice and you take the highest result. And then also, they're in a net, right? So they're caught, which is great for a flying creature, because if a flying creature's movement reduces to 0, then it falls. So that's something I haven't considered. So I'm glad we're going through this. A net is handy for making a flying creature fall down. So that's good to know. Anyhow, the only problem with using a net, there's a second problem, is that if you use a net and you can have multiple attacks, When you use the net, you can no longer have multiple attacks if you're using the same attack action. So this ranger that I have, she actually can do multiple attacks, but only in one action. So if she threw a net, she cannot attack. But then if you have the crossbow expert feat, which she has, you can actually get a bonus action to attack with a hand crossbow. But the hand crossbow will have to be preloaded, which is fine because you can't load a crossbow if you've got a net in the other hand. Although now I'm thinking about this, maybe you could. But so in theory, she could throw a net, it would restrain a creature, and then she could also attack with a hand crossbow, and then you get kind of a good effect there, right? Now, I've just come up with a few things, so I've thought about this some more. Good for flying things, so it's always good to have a net nonetheless. And two, also if you have the crossbow expert feat, you don't suffer from the loading problem of a hand crossbow. So if you threw a net, your hand would be free, and then you could load your crossbow with it, so you could have an unloaded hand crossbow. I don't know, it's a little too much to ask. My whole point of this is all of my workaholic life, I've heard that one of the issues you have being a workaholic is that like you don't have anything else out of your life that you can kind of like focus on, whether that's like God or family or like a garden you're working on. And what I've discovered recently, as I've just demonstrated, is now I really have something else that I can focus on. And I can use all that crazy whatever it is in my head, that analysis and edge finding and all that stuff that made me a good programmer, good at strategy and analysis, and more or less is good at figuring out content stuff. Like I have like an endless hungry black hole that I can pour it into, and it can invade my thoughts. So I think I've solved the workaholic problem that I have. I kind of see that one becomes a workaholic if it's like, well, one, you're prone to this kind of like addictive behavior, but that if there's like nothing else to like, bring you that kind of like what would you call it? Like nothing else to kind of like, point your monkey at,
Yeah,
basically.
silence the chatter in the head, right? Like give you like a real focus, a real like I like it. So one, as we're getting some feedback in the chat there, I think people are generally very impressed with everything you went through. And if there's a test, I'm going to pass on taking the test and everything that was reviewed there. But I do think maybe the other thing you should consider is my son is taking standardized tests this week because that's what we do.
Uh-huh.
And he was just talking about it. He's like, Dad, the reading comprehension and stuff, it's just like the paragraphs are like really boring. I was like, well,
Mm.
that's kind of how it is. And the paragraphs have to be in a certain kind of thing. And I was just thinking to myself, like, Kote, what if you made standardized testing just a series of Dungeons and Dragons questions
Oh,
and logic puzzles, right? I was like, I think the kids, I mean, there's a segment of kids that I think the scores would go up significantly. There's like, I mean, now we're going to need to offer like another alternative test. It's like you can take the regular test, the D&D test, and then maybe we'll have to think of another one that maybe appeals to like a whole different
oh yeah.
genre. But I was like, man, I think this would be just what you said, right? It's just like, wow, the kids would really like certain kids would really be into this. And just as you went through this, because at the end you could be like multiple choice, and therefore the best way to kill the flying monster would be A, use this, B, do this. I was like, that, it's almost like an LSAT for kids based on Dungeons and Dragons. I think that would be
Yeah.
great.
I think you and that's interesting. And I think you're like, I don't think about this very often, but one of my theories of school, I mean, maybe I could ask my mother because she's got a master's degree in education. But like, I think one of the theories of those standardized testing, well, one, you could, I guess there's three things. One, you want to test just like memorize knowledge, right? Do you know something, which is fine, right? But then the part you're talking about too, you like you both want to test that someone can go through the mechanics of applied analysis, right? Given this situation, do you have the tools in your head that you can solve the problem? But then, but there's a third thing, which I think, and maybe this is what causes a lot of problems, because I don't know if it's good or bad. But I think the third thing that like you're constantly tested in school is like, can you do something you don't want to do? Right? Like, can you do something that you're really bored about, that you have no interest in, but can you take that machinery that you have and apply it to like get the right result to it? Right? Because like, for your example, right? Like, absolutely. Like you read it's not like the essays in there are going to be appealing to everyone. Like at best, what they would do, I mean, this would be cheating because everyone knows all the stories, but like you would want something of the general appeal of like Harry Potter and be like, read this passage of like Harry and whoever else doing a thing, and now answer the academic questions based on that, right? Because it would be like entertaining and people would be into it. But like, what this third thing of like, can you're boring, or you be do things you don't like, is like, yeah, we know this is boring and you don't like it, but that's what we're testing. Is like, we want to verify that you can still apply your machine to something that like is
Right.
sucks.
You just have to do it. Well, maybe that's where it is. But we do have from the chat here in the stream, some people coming up with some very good alternative tests. So there's a Minecraft test. I think that would do well. A TikTok test. I love that. This one is really good. A Taylor Swift test. So like everything would be related to maybe like, because there's a lot of people that follow Taylor Swift and like read into a lot of her actions. So you could be like, Taylor Swift did XYZ. And then at the end, like, what does this mean? Right? What is the deeper meaning of the scarf or the hidden stuff? So I guess you're right. I don't know what that says about society. I guess we have to prepare the children to do things they don't want to do. Maybe, maybe that's a broader society implication. But like, yeah, I don't know. But to your point, like when people are interested in any of the topics we just mentioned, like you'll see someone that doesn't like, math or science, whatever, you give them Minecraft and they're like, they come back and they like can do like all these commands and build these, incredible things because they're interested in Taylor Swift. Like certainly there's a lot of logic reasoning that the Swifties come up with when they're like comprising their theories of like what things mean or how to get tickets. That's a very creative group of people as well.
It's like and exactly. And it's sort of like, and that's making me think that this is, this is a very like lighthearted, not like as serious as the issue is, but it also kind of helps explain the culture problem with standardized tests. Is generally it assumes that you're members of maybe not one but certain cultures that just like innately know things, if only that you're interested in it, right? So like you could, so in theory, like I tried to read the Icelandic like tales, and man, so much about sheep. They were just like not very interesting. Whereas like, so in theory you could take like, even a good translation of the Icelandic sagas, and if you use that as like the like read this and tell us about it stuff in American standardized tests, I bet the scores would go down a lot across the board because people would be like, what? Right? And so like, and so you could, there's almost using the mechanics, some of the philosophy of D&D as I relearned the 5th edition rules. They don't always do this, but there's often, for people who've got like a crazy, overactive mind like mine, there are often like gambling choices you can make about which rules to follow, depending on what you want to do. And so maybe that would be another aspect of standardized tests, is like, okay, you can just take there's going to be 3 options for this written thing. You can just take the first one and go with that. Or if you want to take the time to assess the other 2, you could pick one of those and answer to that. So it's not there's not just one like 800-page story that you're going to read and then show that you have some basic like literature analysis capabilities. I don't know what they do nowadays, but I remember that was in the SATs and stuff. But you could take a gamble that if you don't like the first one, you can go check out the other 2, which might be from a totally different kind of cultural vantage point than the one that this first one is written about. Like if you don't like Steinbeck, if you're like, fuck that guy, why don't you go over and you can choose from some other 2 people to read.
You get the classics, right? No, like, but I think your point is like, there's something, maybe it's like there's 3 sections and you just take the best score. You do all 3 sections, take the best score, right? And maybe one is, and it just sort of demonstrates things you're interested in. Or maybe it's just like the advice I gave my son today. I was like, listen, I'm not going to pretend that these standardized tests are fun or even they really represent, much in real life, but like you need to do well on them. And then once you if you can do well on them, then go find some other stuff that you like. And like he's in a bunch of other clubs. And it's like, yeah, it just works out better that way. So I don't know, maybe to your point, like maybe it's just a rite of passage.
I think there's a lot of that's a good thing to you just got to prepare for that. Well, speaking of a rite of passage, Brandon, I think what we saw last week is that no matter how big and successful you are as a systems management company, eventually Cisco is going to buy you. Like I think most all systems management companies end up at being acquired, being at Cisco, where we saw Splunk was purchased, or I mean, I of all people at the moment know the wording here. I'm sure at $28 billion, it's an intent to acquire. I don't know when the closing date is, but I'm sure it will be at some point. Some closing will happen after, like, Portugal approves the antitrust stuff or something. And
Yeah,
I
yeah.
guess
So
they
the
don't have to
news
guarantee
was
the
just,
EU. Paraguay.
well, I thought even like kind of the way it's positioned here. So Cisco, I thought this headline is kind of interesting. Cisco acquires cybersecurity company Splunk in cash deal worth 28 billion. So one, I think it's always interesting. It's like, listen, I know Splunk has repositioned itself a million different times. At the end of the day, it's still just log files. I know you can put anything in front of Splunk, but in the end, it's just they're really, really good at parsing log files, finding things in log files, and you can identify things in log files for millions of reasons: systems management, systems monitoring, observability, cybersecurity. The list goes on and on. So this has been one of these companies I think is kind of interesting, and it felt like it was on for sale for a long time, right? There was like kind of like a speculation that Splunk was going to be bought for, I don't know, probably the last couple of years on and off. And
Mhm.
so I guess in the end, right, it kind of comes back to our, public markets mindset that, that company just ultimately felt like it just got to a point it just could no longer, if you will, grow at a rate that people were excited about. Like, I guess in the
Yeah.
time Splunk has been around, of course, we always have to point out Datadog. Datadog is the company that sort of everyone gets compared to and is probably forcing so many of these companies to get sold off. Datadog went from basically zero to like whatever it is today, like a 30, $40 billion company. So in the end, it does feel like this maybe relieves the strategy tax from Splunk. They don't have to kind of keep telling a new story. I mean, to me, I think of this as like, Cisco is one of the private equity firms that is a public company, right? That, I think IBM's the
Yeah.
other, and there's several others. And it's just like, yeah, they'll just slot this into their deals and it'll, sell. I think this will be, probably lots of overlap customers, lots of overlap type of technologies. But in the end, right, I think it's just going to be one of these things where we'll just look back in 5 years and it's like, oh yeah, Cisco is Splunk, and they're just sort of like throwing off a lot of cash. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I haven't followed Splunk or the space as closely as I used to. At least I think I used to follow it closely. Who knows? But like it does. I mean, I know Splunk has like acquired a few things here and there, but it's kind of like they're more or less like a single product company, right? Like they
Yeah.
don't really, and kind of like ServiceNow. Like I'm back in the big data days and stuff. Like Splunk tried to grow into the like, what if we applied this IT thing to the business, right? Like
Mhm.
I don't know how ServiceNow has gone with that, but like, what we could apply this there. But the other angle is like, I mean, I think we probably discussed this before, but we have the general theory here on Software Defined Talk of the systems management thing, which is like there's basically like five people alive, and they're the ones who found all the systems management companies.
Yep.
Like they start one, it gets bought. They after 2 to 3 years they leave and they form
Another one.
another one, and then there you go. And I mean, obviously that's more or less a joke. There's more than five, maybe 10, and like, but I think the other thing that I think this is true of most systems management companies is if you do not expand out beyond your initial product, no one knows how long the clock is running, but there's a clock running for you being acquired because you can't like, I mean, maybe this is the new benchmark of the clock. I don't know how old, it's some formula based on growth and age as a company, or maybe it's just growth. I don't know, but it's sort of like somehow you're going to hit a ceiling of like we just can't get enough revenue year over year to like meet the expectations of the market. And so therefore either you have to like actually add on new products that are beyond that first product that you had. I mean, they can be highly adjacent, or you have to be acquired by some other company who can therefore then do that, right? Therefore they have a portfolio and everything's fine.
Yeah, and just Splunk was, I just looked it up here, was acquired in 2003. So let's just call it 20 years. So basically that was a 20-year lifespan from kind of start to finish. Which makes sense. And I think, I mean, to your kind of broader point, it's sort of like, and I guess you can kind of just see this with, I think what was the other one, Nick? We talked about New Relic and Sumo Logic. They both got bought by private equity firms. And I think maybe the simplest way is just sort of like when you lose kind of this hyper growth mode, right? And you sort of settle into just being a company that can throw off a lot of cash with good software margins, then that's the point where it seems like private equity or strategic buyers show up because they really value that predictable earnings more so than the public
Right.
market, which is interested in, like, for now, like I'm referencing many times, Datadog and whoever else you think the high growth companies are. So it just comes down to, it's like, it's that money is worth more to private equity and strategic buyers than the public investors seeing it, which I guess makes sense. But it's also one of those things too that it's sort of like, for those, and I, a bunch of people in this offer time talk Slack were talking this week about, how much Splunk customers would be trying to use like their Cisco discounting rules on
Right.
Splunk. Splunk has like forever been positioned as like a very expensive product, right? That, I think it's like because they charge by, like, I think it's like, the terabyte, whatever it was, right? And it had this kind of usage thing. It was really, you always hear people complaining about how expensive it is, but they always pay the bill. So that's sort of like they were buying a product they like. So that's kind of the other question is like, if you put it inside Cisco and you wrap it up in ELAs, does that make it a little bit easier to swallow and sell for end customers? And is that what Cisco is ultimately wants to do with that? Because I don't know. I mean, I don't know. What is your take? I was about to say Cisco's acquisitions, like, I don't know, the success of these, like, I was about to say the record's a little spotty, but I guess it's sort of like they do seem to throw off cash, but they don't fundamentally change Cisco, is I guess the way I think of it is, right? Like when I look at it, like App Dynamics is like fine. I think it's doing well. I wouldn't say it's significantly better that it's owned by Cisco, but it's not all that worse. It's just sort of a nice place for it to live.
Yeah, I mean, you would think that ostensibly, on this podcast where we talk about these kind of things, I would have knowledge, but like, I don't really even know like how Cisco has been doing. So I'm looking that up as I'm talking now, and yeah, I mean, I like your idea. Well, two, one, in my mind, the idea of what Cisco is hasn't really changed. Like, they tried to get into OpenStack and doing things, and they've tried this, but it's like it's still just like networking stuff. And then I think what has changed is like and they've kind of been like this for a long time, but like as you were saying, they just sort of like add new products to their portfolio. And then there's a good Forrester write up of like, she goes over like what Cisco should do basically. and she kind of emphasizes that, like, as with App Dynamics, and I think she said with Thousand Eyes, that like, yeah, if you just keep these as separate brands and don't integrate them into like Cisco, then it's probably going to be good, and just do that, right? Which is like, that kind of lends to your like public private equity sort of situation, is like, what you're doing is you're building out a portfolio of companies that kind of you're being like Berkshire Hathaway of the tech world, right? Like, you've got this portfolio of companies that all bubbles up to one stock, and it's just kind of representative in there, which is great. Like, depending on how you do reporting, like, infamously, depending on what year, whatever inning we're in, whatever minute of the first inning we're in with public cloud, the various public cloud companies don't break out their public cloud revenue or costs, right? Like, or they add in advertising, or like they add in other stuff to kind of like make it impossible
it makes it
to
bigger,
precisely tell, right? And so that's like, that's one of the big strategies that you have in private equity, is that you don't have other people poking their nose into your finances. So in theory, in private equity, you could say like, oh yeah, this one loses a lot of money and this one makes a lot of money, and so we're just moving the cash over there. I mean, you could do whatever, but you don't have the scrutiny of like, hey, this is Jerry Boberry from Deutsche Bank. Just one quick question here. And, it'd be like, you're running this business over here that's consuming 20% of your revenue. By my calculations, if you just eliminated that, you could add like, 5 basis points for a dividend to pay out. So why are you, don't you have a responsibility to maximize shareholder returns? Like, that kind of nonsense. Like, you have people telling you how to run your business. But in theory, if you can kind of hide it in the cover of all this other stuff, you could actually invest in innovation and doing things, or just have a lifestyle business unit.
Right, but you do kind of like, I think there is kind of an interesting market cap kind of level. So I was looking at, so Cisco's worth $214 billion today. IBM's worth $130 billion. So it's sort of like, if you're a company and your market cap's over 100 billion, right? And there's very few companies that can buy the whole thing, right? And then there are companies like Splunk that are in this, like, let's say, tens of billions, right? And it's like, so if you're like Cisco or your IBM or any of these companies there, it's like you kind of have a couple options. You either can say, you can start to like divide yourself up, right? And be like, well, really, the networking business makes all this money. So we should just sort of like, if you will, strip everything out, just run the networking business, and you become like a private equity firm yourself, right? So that's option one. Or option two is what you're saying is, so you sort of become this portfolio enterprise company that's sort of like, when I see an asset that's in the $30 billion range or $50 billion range that's throwing off good cash flow, that maybe I can implement some optimizations for.
Right.
Oracle's probably been the most popular company to do this over the years, right? We're going to buy that, and that's how we're going to juice our earnings, right? And so, and then you kind of have the next tier, right, which is the $1 trillion companies, which is like a handful of them that are sort of at this level playing a whole nother game, right? They sort of can do, like Amazon buy a grocery store, whatever, right? They can kind of do whatever they want. So when you're in that kind of, I don't know, what do you call it? The middle age, the middle, mega cap, if you will, the small mega cap.
Middle mega cap.
That's really where you got to do something, right? And I think this is like, we sometimes talks about, by like Splunk in this case being bought, like they're relieved of the strategy tax, right? They're not going to be asked specifically. There's not going to be earnings call where the CEO has to come up with a cybersecurity strategy. And probably they were working on an AI strategy that they were going to present, right? That kind of goes away. Now that goes to the Cisco level. The Cisco people have to come up with that, and Splunk can just be one box on the slide. And they'll probably say something like, with Splunk's new information combined with our network analysis information, we are well positioned to create the next generation AI, machine learning, security network thing, right? That does X. And that's probably going to be there. So Cisco kind of inherits that large strategy tax. So, I don't know. It's maybe like the circle of life we were talking about before in the other show. It's just sort of like, this is how it goes. And I don't know. At the end, it seems like a good place for Splunk. It doesn't, I don't know. I wouldn't say there's like a winner or a loser here. It's like, it seems like a good place for Splunk. Hopefully the customers will be able to get better discounts. Hopefully Splunk will get the resources it needs to continue to build a good product. And, we'll look back on like, the kind of the AppD acquisition and be like, yeah, good place. Like WebEx is the other one, right? People forget like WebEx is owned by Cisco. WebEx probably not the favorite of this audience, but like, it seems to like, I still see it used for webinars. I still see it, pop up now and again. And I bet you it's just a solid business that throws off a ton of cash.
Yeah. Yeah. There's two more things for that topic. One is like, I never became, I remember the corporate strategy people would always like, I would go over all of my fun little stuff, and they would like lean back in their chairs and stare at me and then school me about finance. And like, there's like there's another aspect of all of this that I have a total blind spot of like when your method of payment is cheap. And so like usually, even I, but it's easy just to think about terms in acquisitions in terms of like retail, just paying all cash for something, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or
Yeah.
to think about in terms, you could even think about it in terms of like getting a loan and then like, paying off the interest on that loan, right? Which is a little more complicated, right? Like, because it might be really cheap to get a loan so you can do more acquisitions, especially if you have like good collateral in yourself to like get more favorable rates. But then there's a whole other weird area that I remember I would see the corporate strategy people do, which is just like, I mean, I guess you could call it financial engineering, but it was more like Excel magic. And like, this is an exaggeration to make a point, but it would be like, hey, check out this spreadsheet, right?
Right.
Like, if we make a $20 billion acquisition for a company that meets this profile of financials, and then we add that to our financials, regardless of anything, there's a high probability that our share price will go up 20% over the next 3 years.
Yep.
And it's just like, because they're going to have more revenue. And it's like, no. This is when they lean back in the chair and they just shake their head. And they're like, no. That's not how things work, right? So, I never know how to do that kind of analysis, but I always have that in the back of my mind of like, is there some crazy spreadsheet shit going on here? Like that it means that like, and then therefore the EV goes up this level, and then like the executives make $5 million more each year for the next 10 years. Like,
but I think, I mean, to kind of put like some, I don't know, more clarity on that, like there is at the end of the day, all these investment banks, the finance groups, right? Like we don't talk about it as much. I mean, we've had a couple of venture capitalists on, but all the investment banks have models for these companies, right? And they
Mm,
basically, what it comes down to is how do they value a dollar of revenue? And so if the finance group, in this case, Cisco, or the people that you were used to work with in your previous job, they have a better sense of like, what are those models look like, right? So they know if I take X amount of money and I put it into this company, that they're going to characterize it this way in the financial model. And therefore it's going to kick out a different, kind of valuation for the company. And it makes sense, right? I mean, I think we tend to like look at that and almost kind of scoff at it because it's like none of it's real. It's just all just, it's like
right.
no products actually change. But at the macro level, this is how that investment community is thinking. They're just like, oh, well, this is now a dollar of cybersecurity revenue, right? Like, and at the end of the day, we're just like, this is log file. This is like parsing log
Absolutely.
files, no matter what you say. And they're like, no, this is a dollar of cybersecurity revenue, and that dollar translates into like $3 of market cap or whatever,
That's right.
right?
That's right.
And that's
Right.
where
Like
people justify those acquisitions.
and Cisco, I mean, is a hardware company. So they, when I was at Dell, we would think like this as well. And other companies is like the dollar you make from software is much different than the dollar you make from hardware. And it has that effect because the profit, it's just all different. And so you throw
Yep.
that into the mix and like your financials change around a lot. And then the second thing I was going to add, which we've kind of hit on, but I think it is, I mean, it's relevant to all of us and me over the past year and the next like month or so is like you do have to like acquisitive companies are always circling on these other companies with the models that they have. Like I remember when I would do acquisitions, like it took me a while to realize that like, oh, you should just always be talking with companies even if you don't think you'll ever acquire them. Like just because you always want to get an idea of like at some point, what if their house burns down and they're really cheap and I could go buy them. In Dungeons and Dragons, we would call this an opportunity attack. And so like, you get an opportunity attack if someone retreats and they don't use the disengage action. And then you get a free attack on them. And so similarly, you can have opportunity acquisitions where you just like every day the junior corporate strategy people come in and update the models and you're like, boom, look at this one. Like
Yeah.
it's cheap enough that it fits into the models here. Now, I don't think any of that really applies in this situation, although I don't really know. But it's just like that's definitely something going on with acquisition stuff. Which also to your point of Datadog and stuff, like I guess you could say that they're like we're in like a couple year market window closing on this generation of monitoring companies, which then you have to I don't know the space as well as I used to, but I guess the big question you would have is like, so is Honeycomb, which side of the window is Honeycomb on? Like are they part of like the Datadog, Splunk, like New Relic, what do you call it? A cadre? Cohort.
Mhm.
A cohort, and therefore they will be acquired with, whatever, 70% accurate confidence? Or are they part of the post Datadog cohort? So therefore we have to like, they're in a different sheet in my spreadsheet from this evaluation over here, which again, I don't really know, but
Yeah, well, I think that I don't think there's like a right or wrong answer there. I think it just depends on who you talk to and how they want to position themselves. But I don't know. I would say they are part of the, the bedrock of the observability, the
Mm,
rise of observability. That seems to be kind of their thing. So I would align them more with like, I think they themselves are like, hey, we're the next Datadog or we're competing with Datadog because that's sort of the
okay.
most
So they're
favorable analysis right now.
yeah.
So I think that's how they position themselves. So it's sort of like if you were updating your model, if you were the junior analyst, you'd say like, hey, we got to really get an observability because this is going to be huge. And the leader that's left out there for us to buy is Honeycomb, right? I think that's how it's
Yeah,
positioned.
and then you have to do an analysis if it's too late to buy them, right? Because
Right.
you have I mean, as always, it's a smooth curve, but if you're looking at acquiring companies, you either want to buy it right before it's a big deal or when it's become old, because
Yeah,
then
it's
then
probably,
then you have a
if it's
problem.
not too late, it's probably getting there, right? And I think so. I don't know. It'd be one of those things. They probably Honeycomb, I guess, is they still think they have a lot of growth and observability. So you probably has to kind of get to the point where everyone's like, oh, observability. Yeah, we know about that. Like, yeah, we get like if
Yes.
you kind of feel like it's already kind of been here, done that, then it's old. If you feel like it's still like it's new and strategic. So I don't know. They're kind of hovering. I don't know, maybe somewhere in the middle. So maybe it is kind of too late to your point. They're gonna have to go to loan, see how big they can get, and then maybe they take a Splunk outcome in 15 years.
Maybe if someone is successful, whatever they would call it, if they do AI Ops 2.0,
Yeah,
right? If you're just like, and the subtitle would be like, for real this time.
yeah,
Like maybe that will like in Olden the observability cohort, and then that creates a new cohort where all the interest is in AI Ops 2.0, and so the observability cohort either has to like jump through that window to still be in there, or they become the future acquisitions for the future Splunks and
yeah.
stuff.
No, I like that. I think you're right. They either have to transition to the new thing, the AI thing, or they have to get bought. It's one or the other, right? Because
Yeah.
something's going to happen there.
And again, this is all from the perspective of the corporate strategy people who are like, I really don't care what they actually do. I care which sheet
Yeah,
they
no, at
can
the end
go
of the day,
to.
we just know like everyone's just reading log files and the same performance data that's been around for the last, I don't know, 30 to 50 years, depending on how you count it. So yeah, we know in the end, the data is all the same. It's just like the story on top of it is all that changes.
So okay, so then kind of in a related area, like the whole area of we got the AI stuff, Brandon. I don't know if you've heard about this, but there's been a couple of things I think I could use your take on. One, like it looks like Amazon is dumping a ton of cash into this company Anthropic, which I don't really know anything about, but I assume if Amazon's dumping 4 billion of, or I'm sorry, it's almost like they're putting I think it's 1.3 billion investing right now with
Mhm.
the option to
To put up
then
to 4
also put
billion
in.
in it. Yep.
Yeah, and I assume that's like an open AI competitor or
Yep.
whatever,
I think
or
that's
could be.
exactly right. Yep.
And then the other thing scurrying around is that you know I'm it seems like the the model makers, all those people we were cosplaying earlier just now, like it seems like they're struggling with a way to like put a model around the AI space. And I don't know if they know they're struggling, but I think what they're currently dealing with is like how many GPUs are out there and how much like what is it required to get them? And then it's almost like once you have a solid number, then you can actually start doing, like, if your model is just all letters and there's no numbers, you can't really do anything. But like once you have one number that's like a real number, you can start modeling things out. And I feel like I haven't really thought about this until I started talking about it, but I feel like no one knows how to model the new AI landscape. And so like people are trying to figure out a way to model it so they can like make investment decisions. And currently the only thing you can really model off of, I guess, is GPUs and the power they consume.
Yeah. So I think we
And
should maybe take them like one by one here. So first, AWS, as you mentioned, has agreed to invest 1.25 billion in Anthropic, which already has taken 300 million from Google. And then, as part of that, AWS essentially has the option to invest up to 4 billion. And so they're behind the scenes. Anthropic's model is Claude, which is just sort of like that's their Chat GPT, which again, of course, they would say is a lot better. But so we're oversimplifying it. So one, this just seems sort of like we've talked about this a little bit on the show. It seemed like AWS, I think they were caught flat-footed a little bit, like, sort of the Chat GPT, and Microsoft jumped on that. So it sounds like Anthropic is the best alternative that's out there, at least I think through
mm,
AWS's analysis. So they've essentially, both invested and created like what, I think Matt Levine would call like a call option. It's like, well, if it's going really, really well after we give you this 1.25 billion and it looks like you're creating even more value, we're just going to basically give you the extra 3.5 or whatever that comes out, 3.75. And not only will that be good for us, it will actually give us a bigger stake in you at a lower price. So it all makes sense, right? So it's sort of like, we talked about kind of the, if you will, the small mega caps. And now here are the true mega caps. And so it's like $4 billion total for Amazon at this point, not a big deal. So it's sort of like just protects them. So I think it makes a lot of sense. It's pretty smart. So going forward though, and this is the part that you were getting at, is that we are starting to see the VCs try to come up with a model. And I think, Brian Gracely did a really good job on the recent Cloudcast talking a little bit about this, about how, VCs sort of get to the point where when they see a lot of their money going to service providers, or in this case, hardware vendors, they start to, if you will, get a little bit concerned because they've seen this before, right? It used to be that, as Brian kind of alluded to, that Startups would just buy a bunch of software from Oracle and Cisco, and they'd spend all this VC money there. So it didn't really create any
Yeah.
new value. It just kind of passed through to these enterprise vendors. And so I think what you're seeing is the VCs coming out and saying, listen, hey, we're about to spend, whatever, $200 billion on GPUs. And the VCs are a lot of the people that are providing a lot of the cash to do this. And I think they're rightfully kind of asking the question, like, well, we kind of know that if you're going to spend all this money, someone's got to make money. And where's that money going to come from? And so I think it's always funny because it's like, this is the classic, if you've ever worked in enterprises, maybe enterprise software, like maybe your boss or your executive has asked you this question. Is like, well, isn't that why we hired you? That's kind of the venture capitalist answer to this question. It's like, didn't we hire you because you said you had these special skills to go identify the most promising opportunities and where we should spend all this money? And I think at least a couple of these links, the venture capitalists kind of throwing up their hands like, hey, we're about to spend $200 billion on GPUs. And that's a lot of money. Like, does anyone know where the actual profits are going to come from? And if so, could you please call us? And it's like, well, that's the game, right? That's why, everybody's out here trying to do something, which I think is just kind of funny, right? It's just, the whole thing is kind of hilarious to me. It's like when someone's just like, wait a minute, I just like, I need help with my project. It's like, no, you signed up for the hard part, so you have to do it, is my thoughts.
Now, since you invoked Matt Levine, like, his number one rule is everything is securities fraud. Like, would it be security fraud if those VCs did dump 200 billion into GPUs and then they took most of the rest of their cash and just bought Nvidia and AMD shares? Like, or is that just sort of like, no, that's how capitalism works?
Yeah,
Like,
well, I think
that's called hedging.
Yeah, I know. I mean, that's called a hedge fund, right? So it'd just be a different financial vehicle. But that's definitely one way to play it, right? One way to play it would just be like, we're just going to buy Nvidia because we have no idea. But of course, like Nvidia's, like everyone is doing that. Hence, that's why Nvidia has gone from like overnight, it went from like a $600 billion company to a $1 trillion company, like in the blink of an eye. So like, there's no, like, saying Nvidia is where you should invest is just like saying, you should breathe air at this point. Like nobody, like everyone is on that.
Well,
So
I guess that's
what
why
do
it
you
would
do
be a
next?
hedge. Is like, it wouldn't be you're looking to make money. You're just looking to minimize losses.
Track the performance. Well, I think the part that is true, I mean, that we can look within this, and it's again kind of, you always want to ask the VCs like the question, what the question is like, well, listen, we all know almost surely we're over investing in GPUs right now. Like, it's almost, I mean, you have to say it's almost, and it's kind of like what Brian was saying on the Cloudcast. It's like there was the point where like everyone wanted fiber. There was like all this like dark fiber was created, and it was like, well, listen, like there's too much of it, right? Like, we know it's happening, but what we don't know, and this is why if you're a venture capitalist, you're paid to figure this out. It's like there will be some huge winners. Like, I have no, like, who knows? It looks like it's Anthropic right now, right? It looks like it's ChatGPT, but just like it, maybe at one point it was Bird Scooters, right? And Bird Scooters, I think, raised $2.6 billion. I saw the other day, the market cap is 15 million now. It's like, well, obviously that was just a miss. Like, it just didn't work out. And so kind of back to the point here is just sort of like, well, somebody has to figure this out. So there's no question we're over investing, but ultimately picking the winners, and a few people will do it, is what everyone's trying to do. And it's almost, and I think this is where like no one, wants to say this. It's sort of like, it's almost impossible, right? Like, I mean, the person that does it will write a book and we'll talk about it and be like, wow, that's incredible. They figured it out. But there's going to be whatever, another 100 billion completely wasted in like the bird type outcomes where it's just like, yeah, turns out we don't need 50 different models, right? It turns out Anthropic and ChatGPT, that's all we needed. Those two are good enough. Or something else will happen, right? And it'll be like, you don't need all this GPU capacity. So when that will happen, and this is the hard problem, like, as a venture capitalist, you got to answer the question of like, when do you think it will bottom out, right? Who are the winners, right? And then can you actually put money in them? And that's like a super hard problem right now. So I guess I'm sympathetic, but at the same time, I'm like, well, that's what the money's for, right? That's why
that's why we
decided to
hired
do
you.
this job, right? That's why we hired you.
Yeah, and then the other thing, which is like, it's good to keep in mind for as much like glowing praise, is like, this whole AI thing still hasn't proven that it's as magical as people say. Like, going back to it, I play a lot of Dungeons and Dragons with the AI, and it's not that good. Like, it's like, it's better than staring at a wall, but it's still like a human is much better at playing, being a dungeon master than the AI. And like, I don't know, but we'll see. So there is a big assumption that like it actually will be magical. And and I bring that up because of course, like if you were to look at like blockchain and all of that and Bitcoin and stuff, that was assumed to be magical. And then just like overnight it was like, nope, not magical. So like that there's also that risk hanging around there. Well, speaking of things that are magical, you came up with a magical phrase for all of this that I just want to call out, Brandon, which is like whenever there's like a bunch of slides with charts drawn from different sources. And I think I'm going to add this on to your category here. I think the magic of this collection of charts is that you've had someone go through, and even though they're from completely different data sources and they might be different, you've had them put them all in the same style in Excel
Oh,
and
definitely.
PowerPoint. So
Yeah.
it looks like they're of all an original, they're single source slides, that it all is kind of like the same sort of data. But then you go look at the real little footnotes and you see they're just like, it's just a collage of data from everywhere. And if you were to see, this is some good like slide uh, tips for you. Whenever you see a bunch of charts in a slide deck and they're obviously just screen captures from a different bunch of different places, you're like, yeah, this is just a bunch of shit you found on the internet, right?
Yep.
Whereas if you make the styles all look the same,
Yep.
you can, as I'm going over, you can still have that reaction, but it takes some extra effort. I can't think of the Dungeons and Dragons equivalent, but like, you're using like the I think it's the change appearance spell, which is easy to deceive if you know to look under. It's different than like an actual polymorphic spell. Anyways, but you came up with the idea. We should call this the Slides Benedict, named after Benedict Evans, who is I think the successor of Mary Meeker when it comes to doing like the 100-page like chart deck. And of course, that's a pun, which is great.
Yeah, yeah.
The
Well, I think
slides.
it's worth, we spent a few minutes on it, and I think we see this a lot with venture capitalists. But I mean, to some degree, you talked about tech marketing in your newsletter this week, so maybe it's kind of all the same. It's sort of like what it's always just worth like what's going on behind the scenes, and like as we kind of already covered on this, it's sort of like financial analysts want to build models and want to look at macro trends. So as soon as they get a number like number of GPUs sold, right? They're off to the races. There's a base number they can begin with, and they can start to build assumptions in an Excel spreadsheet. And they create these great pitch decks, which is where it kind of was coming with Slides Benedict. And it's like, but the whole idea of it is at the end, it is very kind of hollow because they're kind of fun to look at, right? And they have all this macro level information. Like Benedict Evans used to do all this stuff about mobile, right? It was like cool to look at, like
Yeah,
mobile's
it was
doing
great.
this and this is happening and this is happening. But at the end, like when you really get down to it, at the end, all they're doing is like asking that same question we kind of were referring to before. They're like, wow, there's this huge market opportunity. Like, who's going to make money? You know what I mean? Which is like the only question. The only question we care about is like, who's going to make money and where's it coming from? And all of these presentations are built so beautifully, but they just at the end, they don't have any answer. And that all it is for them is sort of, if you will, content marketing for them to go out to founders, right? It's sort of like makes them look smart. And they are smart. I mean, I don't want to say like, it doesn't mean that they're stupid. It's sort of like they've done a lot of critical thinking. They've almost like, if you will, they've done like a great research paper or dissertation on this market, but it's all based on known facts and it's known information. And many of these people are like really good at like, building information that way, but it doesn't get to the heart of the real problem of like, man, we got to figure out where the next companies are coming from, which is like the only question, which I just keep saying, which I think is just kind of funny. So at the end, the VCs, right? Like they're just really good at packaging themselves as knowing a lot about like macro trends, but having really no idea where the new thing is going to come from. And if they knew that, they wouldn't be VCs. They would just go build that thing, right? Which is like so funny to me.
Yeah. No, that is like to cap that off. I think you're making me think one of the things about Slides Benedict, as it were, is like one of the primary audiences for that is probably, what do you call them? The LPs, the limited partners, which is to say the people who give the VCs money, right? Like,
Right.
and like, so that is what I mean, because basically my understanding of why, if you are like, the United Dockhands Union of the West, and you would
Right.
like dump like $1 billion of your pension fund or whatever. I don't know. You would dump like 2% of your pension fund into a 5-year like VC thing, is like, you might lose the money, but you might make a shit ton of money, So
Right.
like it's diversifying your investments, and really like you want to see a slides Benedict that's like, I don't know what y'all are going to be doing, because of course you're going to talk like that. They must be based in Houston, but like what I want to know is that you got a lot of opportunity ahead of you. And so like give me some slides Benedict where your market opportunity is crazy, and then you go do whatever it is you pinheaded people do, and figure that out. And so like probably a lot of those, like whether it's the Meeker stuff or the slides Benedict, it's just like, I don't know, that's a big market, we should dump some money in it. And like
Right,
which
and I
is
think that combined with it's packaged in like in a way that looks extremely both academic, intelligent, and well prepared. Right. This gets back to the whole idea, like why do all these financial analysts spend like 2 years of their life like in working 150 hours a week building pitch decks? Because when you're in the room and like someone's like, look at this pitch deck, what you were saying before, you're like, wow, all these slides are formatted perfectly, and
they
like
got the
look,
Mecco chart.
and they got all these charts in here, and like
Yeah.
look at all this stuff. Like this group of people really knows this market. Of course we would invest our money with them because they are so intelligent and they know it. But like when you dig behind the scenes, you're like, actually this is just like really, really good PowerPoint. And again, like and I think this is, it's not even so much a criticism, it's just a reality. It's like at the end, they don't have the answer either, right? They're just trying to convince people, both the LPs to give the money and the founders with the quote unquote best ideas to come to them. And that's all those decks are trying to do. But they don't have, the VCs themselves don't have any real knowledge of it. And then they'll kind of say like, we see a lot, we do a lot of pattern matching, and they kind of give a bunch of examples like that. But at the end of the day, they don't really know, right? I mean, it can kind of come from anywhere. And that's what we've seen over and over. Like the new big startups just come out of left field and nobody sees it coming. And no one can predict it like in a way that's sustainable. So so that's why I think it's like, yeah, slides Benedict. That's what you're looking at there.
Well, definitely when I see a bar chart and they have the ability to put those little lines between the two bar charts and they tell you the difference between them, I'm like, give them $200 million. Like that's
That's great.
those are the
That's
winners.
right.
Well, speaking of giving people $200 million, do we have any bureaucracy this episode, Brandon?
Let's see a few things. So I sent some stickers to Lee in Wisconsin. So I appreciate Lee emailing in. If you'd like a sticker, all you have to do is send your postal address to stickers@softwaredefinedtalk.com, and I will be happy to send you a sticker anywhere in the world. And also, we don't have to go into it too much, Cote. Just from reading the Software Defined Talk Slack, everyone seems to hate the new Slack UI. I guess the Software Defined Talk Slack, for whatever reason, I guess we're on the back burner. We're on the free plan. We've not been officially converted over, so I'm still have access to the old UI. But everyone says they don't like it. So I just say Brett from Slack. He gave a pro tip. He said it was Command for those on the Mac, either Command Shift S, or I guess Windows, it's Control Shift S. When you get the new Slack design, that will give you your community sidebar back. So I don't know. I haven't actually had to do that yet, but it seemed, it's always best to let like these new UIs like settle down for a little bit before anyone makes any final decision. But I would say if you will, if this was like a political candidate, we'd say this UI redesign has high negatives. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, maybe it's reminiscent of when they introduced the ribbon in Office, which was like, that was a multi-year freak out, and nowadays most people probably have no idea what I'm talking about.
Like ribbon what?
Yeah. I remember, who was it? It was Amy Wall. We were at a Microsoft Build conference maybe in San Diego. Amy Wall of Wall and Associates.
Yeah, PR, right? PR person?
No. She's a veteran industry analyst.
Oh, sorry. My
PR.
apologies.
Unless I'm getting it wrong. Like she went. This is right before they were going to GA the ribbon, and she was going on and on about how they need to put a lot of training in place to retrain all these millions of people on the Office ribbon, which that probably that I don't know, but it worked out. It's when I did see that key combination, I was like, this is one of the many fringe benefits of joining the Software Defined Talk Slack, is that people will feel compelled to tell you how to make your life better if there's simple key combinations you can press, and they'll share this knowledge. Well, there's several conferences coming up, many of which I'm involved in that I'm going to advertise for. So next week, if you're in Utrecht here in the Netherlands, it's actually sold out, so you can't come to it. So maybe I'll see you. But October 3rd, there's the Enterprise DevOps TechCon. a very long name conference, but that's fine. That's going to be fun. There's going to be a lot of cloud native stuff there. And then October 6th, there's Kubernetes Community Days, Texas. I think that's in Dallas. And it looks like the CFP has closed a while ago, but that's going to be October 6th. And then back here in the Netherlands, you can fly back across the side of the pond, as they say. If you come to Amsterdam on October 9th, I'll be emceeing Spring Tour Amsterdam, which I think there's still slots for, but it's totally free. And if you do any Spring programming or Kubernetes stuff and you're in the Netherlands area, or you want to have a day trip from Belgium or West Germany, whatever, but you should definitely come to that. It'll be, as I like to say, it's going to be better than working. So, you might as well do that. And I don't usually recognize or advertise these or mention them, but I'm putting together a webinar series with one of my coworkers who used to work at Sky, big TV outfit and cable and stuff. And we're doing it. It's going to be broadcast on October 10th, 17th, and 24th. And I'm trying to make it into like a summary of like all the stuff I go on and on about, updated. And now I'm a little worried. I need to go make all of my my slides Benedict use the same styles in it. So we'll see how that goes. But we had kind of a run through of the first part of it today, and I think it was fun. I figured out some things that I didn't know. And then of course KubeCon is coming up November 6th and 9th. Also, there's VMware Explorer Barcelona November 6th and 9th, which it's highly likely I'll be there. I have 2 speaking things, and I'm supposed to be at the executive event as well. But we'll see what happens if you've been reading the news. And then finally, January 29th, there's that conference in Texas, which we always enjoy, and I have yet to go to, but maybe one day. And with that, Brandon, what do you have to recommend this week?
Well, I don't have any phenomenal content to recommend. I've been watching too much American football. But the new iOS came out, and actually my wife got a new phone and things like that. So I would say the most important feature that everyone needs to learn is in the new iOS, I guess 17, you can make stickers of like any pictures you want. So what I find that everyone in my household likes is you take pictures of your pets and then you just press on their little if you will, when they're in the picture, and it just magically photoshops or crops them out, and then you can add that to your sticker pack, and then you can use those in your family chat, because frankly that's what all the family wants. Just wants to see your pets in iOS sticker form. So I know they did lots of other important things. Apple's saving the world, but like really, stickers of your pets, that's what people want. So everyone, do that. Go make a sticker of your pet and send it to your family group chat.
I see. I've been wondering what that is. I haven't investigated that stuff.
It's very good. Very simple. You just literally tap on, in this case, my dog, and it just like, boom, figures it out. It's like the greatest cropping tool known to man. It's just like, oh, that did exactly what I wanted.
That's what that 200 billion in AI is going to do for us. Like, goddamn good
really is.
picture
At the
of
end,
Fluffy.
like, that's the answer. We should be like, we figured it out. It's making cropping pets and turning it into stickers. That's what people want, and that's going to be worth billions.
Yeah. Arguably, the answer to that has been proven several times. But yeah, well, my recommendation also related to that. I haven't been able to update my my daily laptop because, of course, it's corporate controlled to make sure that our world is secure. But on my personal devices, I updated, and I've been using this. Will shock you, Brandon. I'm considering using the Notes app again.
Oh gosh, here we go. Again. Did they add anything? I don't think they have the custom background.
There's a few things that have been added. One, you can now add links to other notes.
Yep.
So that was a major problem, right? I mean, a major thing.
Yep.
Now, 2, you'll be happy to know the following. I did buy a new iPad. I got an iPad mini here because why not? And so I've been, of course, you buy a new piece of hardware, you want to use the software that comes with it. And so, I loaded up the new OS. I got the there's a good new version of GoodNotes out, which listeners will remember. GoodNotes writes really well, but it also allows me to have custom backgrounds, so I can use this very old picture of graph paper that I like. However, GoodNotes 6, it just keeps not writing well. I'll be writing and it'll just screw up. And so my finger's about to click the bozo bit on it and never look at it again.
Really? Okay. And you're I don't know. And you're going to the default? I can't imagine.
And so, however, in Notes app, you can still write with a pencil, obviously, and it's perfect, right? Like, you can highlight things and it has really good OCR. Is that what it is? Like, if you highlight your handwriting, it actually has lots of great features. It works really well and things like that. You still cannot put your own backgrounds in there. And I also do not like the fact that you can't type text on top of what you've written and vice versa. Like those are like separate blocks in the app, which drives me fucking crazy that you can't just like do that. But whatever. And so like, I don't know, I've been using it because I think I go through this every time I switch back to using Notes. It's like, I always go between Bear and Notes. And I want to use Bear because it has Markdown, right? And you want to use Markdown. But why do I want to use Markdown? Well, I want to use Markdown so that I have plain files. But Bear doesn't have plain files. It has its own proprietary database. Well, at least I could export Markdown. Unlike you can't export shit from Notes, like I guess plain text and PDFs and stuff. And then I think, so when do I export Markdown from Bear? Never. So then here we are, right? And I had held out. What brought me over to using Bear at some point was like I'd been using the alpha, and it actually had pretty good like Apple Pencil support, and it was just kind of like done natively in there. But then that didn't really translate into the actual GA version of the software. So now it's just Bear. And now that you can link between Notes, I think it's fine. And then you get all the powers. This is like D&D stuff again. You get all the powers of the defaults lifestyle, right? I can go to my iPad. I can just double tap the pencil on it and I have a note.
Oh, I like it. I like it. I'm interested. So we should set the, let's see, today is Wednesday. What is it?
Yeah,
September 27th.
Like
everyone at home, the over-under will say 6 months. So we'll give it, we're going to make this a new year. We'll check in at January 1 around then. We'll check in with Cote. If you believe Cote could be continuing using that Notes app, the default Notes app by January 1, you should join the Software Defined Talk chat. That's what you need to do. And if you don't believe it, you should join the Software Defined Talk Slack as well. And we'll maybe we should have a channel where we just sort of like check in week by week. Does Cote miss the graph?
Oh, that would be good.
Would it go there? But I think there's like a holy trinity of like, let's just call it white collar productivity desires. And it's sort of, I call it three things. It's making coffee, right? It's taking notes, and it's coming up with some type of to-do list, right? Like these three things kind of, it's not just a technology thing. Like if you listen to the Gab Fest, that's sort of that I think some of us like. John Dickerson will talk all the time about how he takes notes and he writes them down.
Is he still an Evernote guy?
Well, he's in like, but he talks about it over and over. So these are the three things. Like if the VCs are looking to solve this $200 billion gap, you need to solve these three things. You need to figure out like there is only one correct way to make coffee, and this is it, right? This is the correct way to take notes, and this is the correct way to do to-dos. Because like there probably are collectively like 4 billion podcast hours collectively devoted to these three subjects. So my thing, and I'll give everyone the secret though. Here's how I've accomplished all of these. One, I don't drink coffee, so therefore have no need for that.
Boom.
2, I generally, honestly, don't take notes. I know this is very like people don't like, I just literally don't take notes or very, very rarely. If I have to write something down, the Notes app is more than enough. In fact, I need less text, right? Because it's only going to be one line at most. And then the third thing, the to-do, I don't know. The reminders app to me, totally fine. So that's how I've done it. But that requires some sacrifice on the listener's part. You have to give up some things to if you will. But I feel like when you give it up and you give up the caffeine and you give up the notes, I feel totally fine.
I think that's some good defaults lifestyle thinking, right? One by default doesn't need coffee. That's a modification that you add on in your life. Yeah. So we'll see. I mean, I think I say this often, but if Apple were to combine their Freeform app with Notes, then they would have the perfect tool. Because Freeform has all of the stuff that I can do in GoodNotes that I want to do in Notes. But Freeform is like, to its credit, to its name, way too unstructured. And the way that it handles typing text is awful, right? So anyways, there's if anyone.
No, I like it though. The good news, maybe, and this is where we end it for you. It's like the good news is that it does seem like there are a ton of Apple employees focused in on these problems, because Freeform probably came out of like, why, you can just see the designers at Apple being like, we need an app that like, that isn't so constrained.
They're like,
and
they're definitely use Miro. Come on.
And they're like, that came out of their, kind of inside Apple. They're like, we need it. And there are some strong note takers at Apple. Like, Tim Cook deep down, that guy's a note taker. He's not leaving without like a list of stuff
He's
that
probably on
he's
that
gonna,
Cornell shit. Like,
yeah, he's like, yeah, he probably is. So like those, so maybe they will get there for you,
man,
right?
can
Because
you
they're,
imagine if you use the Cornell method and you could have like a team of 3 assistants who went back through and summarized it, and
oh
like
yeah,
that's
like yeah. So
wow.
you're right, they do. You know, I mean, a lot of stuff may never work for Apple, but like there's that team at Notes. They're working on it. So there's hope. Yeah, maybe there's a graph paper lover or a custom background person in there. Like we just got to find them. They're probably in there
Maybe there's
somewhere.
a hack that well, whatever. I'm gonna
Yeah.
stop.
All right.
being
Well,
fanboy.
we'll keep on it. You know, iOS 18 is only a year away. Maybe they'll hit it.
Yeah, we'll see. Yeah, we'll see what that journaling app is like too. That was like, can I just say as we close out, I want to put a moratorium on announcing a product and then not releasing it. I'm not into that. I don't do that. So, well, speaking of things not to do, you should not subscribe to this podcast because you've been listening to Software Defined Talk, and if you've listened this far and you don't subscribe, you definitely need to subscribe. This has been episode 434. So if you want to see links to things we talked about and a whole bunch of stuff we didn't, you can go to softwaredefinedtalk.com/434 and find that. You should join the Slack community that we talked about. As Brandon mentioned, you can get stickers for free if you email stickers@softwaredefinedtalk.com. And it would be great if you recommend this to your friends and your enemies, your children, your dogs, whatever it may be. As I like to say, if you find yourself with some sort of control over someone else's device that can subscribe to a podcast, give them a little unasked for present. Look up Software Defined Talk on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Overcast, for a limited time Google Podcasts, and just subscribe to this podcast. They'll thank you, or at least not know it was you, and you'll never hear about it. But we will get the download numbers. And with that, we'll see everyone next time. Bye-bye.
All right, good work as always, Cote. Michael, I just saw your note there. I didn't realize DevOps Day, Indianapolis. Sure, I'll add it to the list. 5th and 6th. Michael, you going to be there? Are you going to be there at the giving some type of presentation? I didn't. You're not going to be at that one, right, Cote? I assume no.
No, I don't go to the DevOps days like I used to. Kind of sad.
What? All right, we'll add that one, Michael. I did not see it in the chat until I just figured that. All right, well, thanks to everyone for hanging on today, and we were a little bit earlier, so it was fun to always talk to everyone. Always enjoy seeing all the chat as we go through it. So we should be on next week, probably closer to our regular time in the afternoon. So we'll make sure to join the Slack, and we'll make sure to put the link in there when we start. So we'll talk to you next time.